Today we're going to talk about the switch Endstop. Now this is different from the previous tutorial on the simple switch in that it has capacitors and resistors on here to smooth out the signal from the board. So to review, on the MKS SGEN L version 1.1, we have our X minimum port, our X maximum port, our Y minimum port, our Y maximum port, our Z minimum port, and our Z maximum port. Now the pins in each one of these ports breaks out as follows. The top pin is always going to be voltage. In this case it's 5 volts because that's what we have the logic of the board set to. And what I mean by that is this jumper right now is set for 5 volts. If you wanted 3.3 volts, you would raise the jumper and move it over to these two pins. Now the middle pin over here is ground, and the very bottom pin right here is a signal pin. So for each one of these, the bottom pin will be your signal pin for your connection. So now that we understand that, I have to talk about the switch and what the logic looks like. So as you can see right here, we have on the part that connects to the actual switch, the red on the bottom, which is your voltage. The middle is black, which is hard to see on this. And then our green over here is our signal, which I marked as blue for simplicity because I didn't have a Sharpie in that color. So as you can tell with the other end, when we connect it to the board over here, red is on top, black is in the middle, and green is at the bottom, which corresponds to voltage, ground, and signal. So to hook this up, all we're going to need to do is take this end and we're going to put it in the X minimum and slide it down like so. To do the other port, what we're going to do is we're going to lift this up and we're going to connect the notched connector, as you can see right here, to the notch here. And so that's what it looks like. So I'm going to place this down here for now. And I'm going to show you how to load the firmware. So to load the firmware, we're going to need to attach the big end of the USB serial cable to our board. And we're going to connect the small end to the computer, which looks like so. And you may hear a beep. Okay, before we do anything else, I wanted to re-review the Endstops with you because the MKS SGEN L version 1.1 has the Endstops right here in the pinout diagram where I'm moving the mouse. So that would be the X minimum, the Y minimum, the Z minimum, and we also have X maximum, Y maximum, and Z maximum. Now if you can see right here, it says what their pinouts are. So this is going to be 5 volts. Then we'll have ground, and then we have our signal pin, and they have their individual number to specify which pin they are. So now what we need to do is we need to pull down the Marlin firmware. So we're going to type Marlin fw.org and press enter. We're going to click the download tab. And what we're going to do over here is we're going to pull the actual firmware for this board. Seeing how it's 32-bit, we have to use either the 2.0.4.4 version, or we have to use the nightly release, or the ones under development for 2.1. In this case, I like to use bug fix, so I'm going to click on the zip file and pull that down. And while that's pulling down, I'm going to show you something real quick here. Under resources, we have reporting issues. A lot of people ask me questions that I can't always answer right away. So there's a website that you can go to for reporting issues. You can click on it right here. And for instance, if you have an issue with your board like MKS SGEN L and you want to look it up, you can press enter and it'll show you if there's any issues on your board and if they've been fixed or if they're open bugs. So this is a good place to check before asking me because I might not know right away what's going on. I usually find out when I get comments in the comments field of the video tutorial. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open or show in folder the actual Marlin firmware. So I'm going to right click on this and extract it and click the extract button. And while that's extracting, let me let you know that I purchased all of the equipment with my own money and no one's paying me or sponsoring me to do any of these tutorials. But I will be placing Amazon affiliate links or other affiliate links in the description for your convenience to purchase. So while this is downloading, if you don't already know it, with this tutorial in the very first one, I showed you how to install VSCode with Platform.io as the plugin. I highly suggest using that in the case of this board to simplify your software builds and uploads. So now that it's almost done, I'm going to click or type VS to bring up VSCode and press on the icon. And since I had a folder already open earlier, this is going to look familiar to me. But what I want to show you is that we want to go to the source folder, then the core folder, then boards.h. Inside boards.h, what we want to search on is actually MKS SGEN L, as you can see right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to close out of boards.h and I'm going to minimize all these folders. Sorry, I had a bunch of things open here. And I'm going to go to configuration.h. Inside configuration.h, I've got a bit to explain. So to first start with, we're going to search on motherboard. And as you can see, the current default board from our download is board_ramps_14_EFB. So we want to paste what we just copied, which is the MKS SGEN L. And that'll set up what our motherboard is so it knows how to compile it with the pins file. Next, what we want to do is I want to set the serial port to -1. You'll see why in future tutorials, but it makes life easier for you. Keep in mind our baud rate right now is 250,000. And next what we want to do is search on Endstop. And as you can see, we have Endstop settings. Now in here, things get a little different. We're still going to use the X minimum, the Y minimum, and the Z minimum. But if we so choose, we could enable like X maximum. I don't suggest doing this. This is only for the tutorial that I'm showing you this. I would stick with all minimums. And you only need 1 per axis. If you choose to have 2, you're going to confuse yourself and me if you ask a question about it, because you only need 1. It's trying to find 0.0, meaning the starting point that you're moving out from. If you add 2, you're adding a max and a min, and it makes it very confusing. So over here, we have Endstop pull-ups. This eliminates a float point, usually with a resistor or capacitor. If you're having issues where you're not getting even signal, you can enable this. I don't use it. Some people may. We also have a pull down resistor that does the exact same thing, but I don't use it. And then down here we have inverting. And because we have capacitors and resistors on this board, what we're going to do is we're going to change the inverting to true in this case, because otherwise it'll say that it's triggered when it's connected. It'll also say triggered if there's no end stop connected. So it can be very confusing. In this case, we have one connected, so we know it exists. So now that we have that set to true, we need to prepare this to compile. So we're going to go over to platformio.ini. And right now, the default environment set to the Mega 2560. We are currently not using that as our chipset. That's for the ramps Arduino configuration, which we do not have. So to figure out what we have, I already know what it is, but I'm going to show you a little trick. If you go up here to source, and then you go to pins, because I know that it's in this folder for LPC 1768, I'll show you why. This is where our pins file is stored, and as you can see, it says pins underscore MKS SGEN L.h. We're going to open that for a second, and I'm going to show you a little bit about our pins. So here are the signal pins. These are pins that correspond to the board that we're currently using. And it obviously says what our default chipset environment is right here. But here's our actual signal pin for the X minimum. Actually, that's not correct. Well, it is correct. It's right here. So this is the X minimum pin that we're using for our end stop. That's how we know how our pins are aligned on our board, because they're all outlined in this pins file. So back to what I was talking about for setting up your default environment. I'm going to close out of this for now, and I'm going to change this or paste or type LPC 1768. So that's our chipset. So to compile, what we can do is we can click the checkbox, which will build, otherwise known as compile, or we can do the upload because we actually have a board connected. So I'm going to click the upload button. Okay, now that the build is completed, we can check to see if it actually completed okay. So right now it says succeeded in 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Now if we scroll up, we can check to see if the chipset worked, which is right here. And apparently it says successful, so we're good there. Now another way to confirm is to go to the USB drive. As you can see, we have firmware, which if you haven't watched my previous tutorials, I always emphasize that this will always be here. This is recently entered this drive. And as you can tell, this is actually our completed binary file. So to load it, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the USB. And I'm going to show you how to do that real quick by just pulling it out. Now I'm going to place it back in. And watch how it updates the actual time of the build. So now the time has been updated. So now we want to actually test it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my desktop. And I'm going to open up print run. And I'm going to go to printerface. And I'm going to connect to the printer. Now as you can see right now, it says connecting. And now it says printer is now online. So to test the actual end stop, we need to type M119 and press enter. And as you can see right now, everything except for the X minimum, where we have an end stop connected, says triggered, whereas the X minimum says open. So to test this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger it with my finger, and I'm going to press M119 and send it again. Now it says triggered. So if I release my finger and press send, it says open. So if you like my tutorial, please press the like button and subscribe. And thank you for your time.